Hey everybody, it's Perch. Here's a nice viewer question. A nice question about a bad topic. So the question is, hey Perch, why is it that publishers have moved to doing limited series and not more ongoing? Since they just cancel or reboot the ongoing comic anyway, isn't having the limited series comic detrimental to the sales of the comic? If they just build all these things as ongoing and then cancel them like they normally do, wouldn't this make a lot more sense? Um, So, yeah, a couple things here. First of all, I don't think it makes more sense. I do think, for whatever reason, well, okay. So, historically, you should know that for a long time there was this built-in belief, there was this certainty that limited series, calling a book a limited series, dramatically hurt its sales. That if you did a limited series, it was people were not going to pay attention to that. I believe, although I may not be completely right here, that this is one of those statements that was attributed to Jim Shooter during his run, but that may or may not be fair. In fairness, I've that was such common knowledge in the '80s and even the '90s. A lot of retailers were told this to the point that a lot of retailers started telling it back to the publishers, saying limited series don't sell. But this was it was like an echo chamber that was going on. The retailer was telling the comic publisher is telling the retailer this, retailer is telling the comic publisher this, and everybody became very convinced that limited series don't sell. The problem with this is in the world of the newsstand, there may have been some truth to that, and it makes sense. The newsstand tended to operate from a perspective of, comic books are ordered, they go in, they go on the shelf, and a lot of change. I mean, God, what's going on right now with the amount of series starting and ending and limited series and different numbers, like this one's 3 and this one's 5 and this one's 7. I mean, that would drive the newsstand crazy. It's hard to manage stock and really deal with that. It's actually making a lot of the retailers crazy as well. By the way, as yet maybe a topic for another video, but this is one of those things that came up. I've become convinced that a couple years ago at the New York City Comic Con, there was this story that Bleeding Cool ran with. And you've probably have all heard of it. It's where it was listed that a retailer stood up and basically told David Gabriel, I believe it was David Gabriel, but some people at Marvel, that diversity wasn't selling and they didn't want any more of that diversity. Now, I was present, as it turns out, at that event. No, I wasn't the guy shouting out. And that isn't what was said. That was not at all, that was portrayed in a way that made the retailers sound like they were a bunch of racist, crazed white guys who were saying, get rid of them blacks. That's how Rich wrote the article. It could be not further from the truth. That's not at all what was happening. But the story got picked up, and I was surprised to see Marvel and DC sometimes, members, full-time employees of those companies, refer to that event as well, this is why, a lot of the retailers, it's tough to deal with the retailers sometimes. And since that time, I've noticed that there's more of a gap between the retailers and the publishers, almost like an extra little arm's distance has been put up between the two. And so I've got this theory that the publishers never seem to really want to talk to the retailers in the first place. They like that relationship where you had the distributor between the two. And back in the day when there was the newsstand, there was plenty of distance between these entities. And I've become convinced that in many cases they use that story as a way to reinforce that distance to basically keep it going. I may be wrong about this, but anyway. Um, Back to the original topic at hand. There's no real truth to the idea that limited series, especially in the world of the direct market, not counting the newsstand, that limited series are sales poison. Instability is. So when things are confusing, when titles go from ongoing to limited series, when the retailer orders believing it's an ongoing series and then discovers it's a limited series, which has happened a lot this year because the titles have been solicited very poorly, or when this comic is this limited series is 5 issues, this one's 6, this one's 8, that kind of stuff is frustrating and it's hard to figure out how to keep a good stock on the shelf. That much is true. I think, and I think this answer changes from year to year, decade to decade, but in the one we're currently in, I think that the publishers should make an attempt to have as many ongoing series as possible. If there's a question about, well, we're not sure if this is an ongoing or not, make it an ongoing. You've already trained the market that you can cancel things at a moment's notice. So having this way out of balance limited series play, and I was talking to somebody and they were saying, do you realize that 75% of DC's comics right now are limited series? And I said, no, that's not true. It's not, by the way. It's not. It's under half are limited series, but it's still a high number. But that's the perception people have of DC right now, is that they're doing a ton of stuff that are limited series. Now, weirdly, comics like I don't know, the that Infinite Frontier comic that came out, or further back the Sean Murphy's White Knight comic, people don't see those as limited series. Death Metal, people don't see as limited series. It is, they all are by definition, but they see those more as events or contained stories. But things like Aquaman, The Becoming, Black Manta, Supergirl, and kind of you can go on and on with the different comics that are out there. Those are limited series. And over at Marvel, it's a little bit more aggravating because you have a couple comics, the Maestro comic that Peter David's doing, the Symbiote Spider-Man that Peter David's doing. Both of those comics have gone through multiple iterations where they basically were a limited series and then immediately followed up with another limited series. In both cases, Marvel would have been far better off to just have them be ongoing comics and go with what works for a lot of reasons. What I believe Marvel and DC are trying to do is they're trying to capitalize on the number one sale. So they by doing a lot of limited series, they have, even if they think, hey, this thing could do well and we could do 3 or 4 volumes of this, we'll get 3 or 4 number ones out of it without having to relaunch it. We know that pisses off people, so we'll just do these self-contained little stories. The problem is they've done that too much. So they're starting to actually see an erosion of what number one comics will do. People have learned not to trust number ones nearly as much as they used to. And by putting it out of balance, they're eroding the confidence people have in ongoing. More and more people are just kind of mentally of the impression that, yeah, this is going to be a limited series. This is just this, even if it's listed as an ongoing, it's going to be a limited series. And so if I don't completely love the concept, the pitch, the creators, whatever it happens to be for this comic, I'll just wait it out and I'll wait for the next version. It'll be out in, I don't know, 6 months, 8 months, there'll be another one. They'll relaunch it again. That's harmful. I think that their core characters, and again, it's a perception thing, because actually, if you look at Marvel right now, you have, in theory, lots of ongoings. You have Spider-Man, that's an ongoing. They didn't relaunch it when Spencer left. The Avengers is an ongoing. You have the Hulk, which finally did relaunch, but that is another, as Donny Cates intended to be another ongoing. Thor is an ongoing. Captain Marvel is an ongoing. You can go kind of down the list. They actually have quite a few ongoing titles, more than you probably think. But because they've done so many limited series, because they've tilted so much into that strategy, when people look at the companies, it's like the retailer that says 75% of DC comics are limited series. It's not, but that's how it feels. And if that's how it feels more chaotic. It feels more like stuff's coming and going, and it's harder to get an assessment on what's happening day to day. And if that is the perception that people really start getting and absorbing, then it's giving them one more reason to step back from comics, to not commit. I think you need a core set of titles that are ongoing series, and even if it means you cancel them, even if it means that sales don't go very well, and on issue 12 or so, you wind up, you have to cancel it. That's not a good outcome. And you're going to get some of that, but it's better to start retraining your audience that you do prefer ongoing stories, because you are in the business of ongoing stories. And maybe this is one of the cases where, kind of like some of the interviews lately, where they say, I really think the future of the industry is in OGNs and short little bursts of stories. I mean, you could think that, and maybe that is where things will go. But right now, the game you're currently playing, the business you currently have, it's built on this idea of this serialized ongoing story. That's what comics are. You might hate that, but that is where it's currently at. That is what comics is currently all about, for what it's worth. So, interesting question. I'm curious what the audience thinks. Do you think, well, first of all, do you think limited series are by their nature poorer, lesser products? Do you not buy them? How would you feel if the companies just kind of went forward with saying everything's an ongoing, and then some of them do get canceled? The problem is that's not really a change. Like, they could do more of that, but that is what we have today. So if there's a idea within the comic publishers, like, well, we can't have too many ongoing, so you don't want to cancel stuff too often. Dude, you're canceling stuff all the time. That ship sailed. Don't worry about it. Anyway, let me know your thoughts on this topic below, what you would prefer as a buyer, as a customer, and thanks for listening.